And hello everyone, my name is Daniel Ferguson and this entire video is going to be a rant because I am incredibly pissed off with myself at this point. I have been trying to track down a specific model of GT620 graphics card for the past month, and just when I thought I had found something that would work, I discover yet again that Nvidia's naming schemes have completely screwed me over. And what I mean by that is, Nvidia, for the love of God, why are you so keen on releasing a graphics card with 20 different versions, all with different specifications? And what I mean by that is, it's happened with the GT1030, it's happened with various 16 series graphics cards, and a lot of graphics cards before then. I think it's most egregious with this GT620 now that I'm looking at it, because there are 3 different categories of GT620. There is the GT620 reference design, 96 CUDA cores, 700 MHz on the core, 850 odd megahertz on the RAM, sometimes 900, with 1 or 2 gigabytes of memory. That's the normal GT620. And then there are 2 different OEM versions. There is a separate category for the 1 gigabyte OEM versions that come with 48 CUDA cores, literally halved, and faster clock speeds for some reason, 810 MHz on the core and 900 MHz on the memory, all the times, always 900. All of the OEM models have 900 with the 1 gig model. But the 2 gig OEM model, still 48 CUDA cores, I was about to say ROPs, no, that's a modern graphics card thing, still 48 CUDA cores, but this time 700 MHz on the core and 800 MHz on the memory. So there are 3 different types of GT620, and then, because those are just the reference numbers, and then there is the insanity known as third-party board designs. Every GT620 has the same power budget of 49 watts through the PCIe slot, and every GTX 620 should in theory perform within 2 or 3% of each other, except they don't, because most GT620s that I have been able to find online have 2 major problems. They are mislabeled because sellers don't know there are so many differences between the cards, or they're just not labeled at all, which makes it incredibly difficult to identify the card, and most of them end up being OEM models from my experience. But then there's the issue that when you find a card that looks like it's going to be the right one, you do a bit of digging, you finally find a spec sheet, and you find out that it has the wrong memory clock. Why is this so important? Well, I will just grab the GT620 that I have sitting next to me in a motherboard. This 1 gigabyte GT620 has a 700 MHz core and a 600 MHz on the RAM. Now, the GT620 that I want, that I cannot find, is the Asus Direct Cooling or DCU2 thing. It's the passive model of the Asus 2 gig model. Now, I don't specifically need 2 gigs, but I need the clock speeds of that card. And that card came with 800 MHz on the core, which could easily be overclocked, and 900 MHz on the memory. 900, not 600. The problem is that apparently is the only model of card that came with 900 MHz on the DDR3 RAM. And I cannot find anyone selling it. I have contacted people in Shenzhen, China, who work in those giant retail centres selling computer parts. They haven't been able to find it for me either. I've waited weeks. All of my contacts got back to me. They could not find it. So I've given up on finding that specific card. So I went down the rabbit hole of trying to find a card with those clock speeds. Now, I'm not specifically looking for 800 MHz on the core. 700 is close enough. I can overclock. But the memory clock is more important. This card at 600 megahertz only manages to overclock to 700. Beyond that, it dies. And MSI Afterburner won't let me push it past 750 anyway. You can't extend it there. That is the actual limit of what this card can do. So, I need a card that at the very least runs at 800 megahertz, so I can overclock it to 900. There are two models, an EVGA and an ELSA model of GT620 that came with 800 megahertz RAM. Can't find either of those either. Okay, fine, let's go for 700 megahertz RAM. I can overclock it to 800. That's close enough, right? Now I can't find any cards with 700 megahertz RAM. All of the GT620s available have 600 megahertz RAM. And then, while I am scrolling and trolling through all of the tech power-up pages and all the other GPU spec databases, I come across the specs for the GT630. Now, the GT630 has 96 CUDA cores. It has 8 ROPs. It has... I was about to say 16. I think it also has 4 TMUs. That doesn't matter. It has an identical core layout, but double the memory bandwidth. The core clock is 810 megahertz for almost all of the GT630s. And the memory bandwidth is doubled at 128-bit instead of 64. But all of the memory clock speeds are pretty much within the same range of either 800 or 900 megahertz for the DDR3 model. There was a GDDR5 model of the GT630, which is not what I'm looking for. But the lower end models of the GT630 are effectively just an overclocked GT620 because they have the same core. They don't have the same chip, it is a completely different die, but they have the same core layout, in theory the same performance, but that doubling of the memory bandwidth means that depending on the title, the GT630 is going to handedly outperform the GT620. Okay, no big deal, just underclock the GT630 so that the memory matches the bandwidth of the GT620. Because the GT630, with its stock speeds and that 128-bit bus, that's almost 30 gigabytes per second of memory transfer speed. Now, the GT620 tops out at 15. So, half the clock speed on the memory, you get GT620 performance, right? No, because the power budget on the GT630 is higher than the GT620. This thing is limited to 50 watts. The GT620 is limited to 70 watts. Sorry, the GT630 is limited to 70 watts. So, depending on the title, it's still going to outperform the GT620, so that's not an option. Okay, fine, what about the GT625? Because that card existed for some reason. Well, that's also not an option. For an even weirder reason, it doesn't have an identical core. It's missing core. Why? It's a step up. Shouldn't it have a bigger die, a nicer die? I don't know. I don't know why. It's got parts of it disabled. So I am going completely insane, trying to find a GT620 that will work for the project I'm working on, which is recreating my first gaming PC to see just what it was capable of back then, and whether or not I was completely screwed with going with this card. 11 years later, I definitely am, because I built that first gaming PC. I bought my first GT620 used from CEX in February of 2014. It has been over 11 years since I made that purchase. And what arrived out of the blue, because CEX doesn't guarantee what model of graphics card you're buying. CEX's website just groups graphics cards together unless a specific model is ridiculously more valuable than the rest of them, then it will have its own listing. So all of the GT620s are grouped together by their VRAM capacity. I bought a 2GB GT620. What arrived was the Asus DC2, and that is apparently the fastest GT620 and also apparently complete unobtainium in 2025. Okay, fine, but that means that I have completely screwed myself. I have completely screwed myself. And what's more is 2014, I shouldn't have gone with Nvidia for the price that I paid. I paid £25 British all in for a used GT620 in February of 2014. If I had paid £35 British, I could have gotten a used R7 240. Now, yeah, okay, that's not a particularly powerful card. It's twice as powerful as a GT620. In fact, it's about as powerful as a GT640, depending on the game. So, yeah, if I had spent £10 British more, I would have gotten a much more powerful GPU, and my gaming experience in 2014 would have been far superior. But why am I creating my first gaming rig again? Because I have the parts. I have a 3rd gen Intel motherboard, well, 2nd/3rd gen. I have the RAM that I need. I even have a hard drive, which is almost identical to the hard drive I was using to boot off of in 2014. So I've installed Windows 7 to it in preparation of doing all of this. I've ordered the exact CPU I need, which cost me 10 British pence, plus postage. And all I need is a graphics card that is within a certain margin of the performance of the graphics card I had, and I can actually find out how good my first gaming rig was. Now, when I say my first gaming rig, it wasn't my first gaming rig. I was born in 1998. I grew up on hand-me-down systems and 90s video games. One of the first video games I remember ever playing was Lemmings, and Lemmings ran in DOS. Yeah, I had it on a Windows 98 computer in like 2002, so I was 3, maybe I was 4. It was a great game at the time, very easy to understand for a young child on a computer, and I loved it. And also, of course, Windows... What is that game where you're... Pinball Machine, that's it. I couldn't remember the name of Pinball. Anyway, I played a lot of games as a kid. I grew up on consoles, PS1, PS2, PS3, original Xbox, Dreamcast, Nintendo Wii. I think I used a Sega Saturn at some point. But there was always a computer in the house. There were always Flash games on the internet. Like I grew up on places like Newgrounds and Stick Adventure Flash games and RPGs. Sonic RPG 7. Is that the one that used the intro music from Full Metal Alchemist? I don't remember. Whichever of the Sonic RPGs that used the intro music from Full Metal Alchemist, I played that game a lot. Despite the fact that it is just a Sonic-themed Final Fantasy game, and I knew nothing about Final Fantasy, I loved that game. And it was fan-made. It was still really good. It was also probably one of my earliest experiences with Sonic the Hedgehog, because I hadn't played any of the other Sonic the Hedgehog games yet. So, that's a thing. But I want to recreate my first gaming experience, because in 2013, December of 2013, I bought myself a copy of Dead Space 3. Now, I had tried to buy a copy for PS3, but me being 14, or about to turn 15, and it being eBay, and me being unmedicated autistic and not really reading through what I was buying, I saw the cover image, I saw the price, and I clicked buy now, not noticing that what I had actually ordered was a physical copy for PC. So what arrived was a new in-box copy for PC. Great. Well, now I have no money, and eBay's return policy at the time did not allow me to send it back just because I didn't want it. So I was stuck with it, and no money to buy the copy I actually wanted. I had to make it work. And at the time, I had my mother's PC from when she was going through university, so it was a few years out of date by then, because she bought it at the beginning of her degree, and then I got it when she was finished. So it was an i3 2130 system with 4 gigs of RAM, Windows 7 on a 500 gig hard drive. It was a small form factor HP Pavilion from like 2012, and I got it for myself in end of 2013, beginning of... No, I think it was from 2011, because I got it in 2013, and her degree was 2 years. So, that doesn't matter. I had that PC. Now that PC was running on integrated graphics, which was fine for the Flash games that I was playing, and the older 90s games that I was playing, and PlayStation 1 emulation at the very most. but it couldn't handle anything past that, and suddenly I needed it to play Dead Space 3. Well, even on the lowest settings at 800 by 600, Dead Space 3 did not play well on integrated second-gen CPU graphics, which meant that I needed a GPU. Now, I knew some parts about computers. I knew how to swap a hard drive, how to upgrade RAM. I didn't know that much about graphics cards, so I just went on various forums, various benchmarking sites, and I specifically looked for a card that would be able to run Dead Space 3 at 720p, which a GT620 can. It ran Dead Space 3 on a mixture of low and medium settings at 720p above 30 FPS most of the time, and that was enough for me to play Dead Space 3. But suddenly I had an EA account through Origin, so I was exposed to the Origin store. And I couldn't afford the Origin store, so I looked at how the hell you get PC games at affordable prices, and I figured out that the Steam Summer Sale was a thing. I bought this the beginning of 2014. By the time that 2014 Steam Summer Sale came around, I was ready. I had some money, I had accounts, and I waited. And then I bought a bunch of Steam games, and I played as many of them as I could through a card just like this. But the thing is, this card did not last me long. Yeah, I upgraded my CPU and platform twice in that same year. I used a Q6600 for a few months and then went to an FX6300 by the time that Christmas of 2014 rolled around. But at the same time, by the time Christmas of 2014 rolled around, Dragon Age Inquisition came out. Now, I loved Dragon Age 1 and Dragon Age 2. I played them both on the PS3. But Dragon Age Inquisition was a next-gen game coming out on PS4 and Xbox One. I didn't have those systems. I had no intention of owning those systems because I had been exposed to PC gaming and how much more affordable it was. So I intended to stay on PC and pursue that for gaming purposes. So I bought myself Dragon Age Inquisition for PC. And a GT620, as overclocked as I was able to get mine, could not run Dragon Age Inquisition. At all. No chance. Lowest settings, 800 by 600, wasn't happening. So I needed an upgrade. And my birthday was just weeks away. So I begged my mother, I went through CEX's catalogue, because I had experience with them, I knew they could be trusted, and I found one that was within both of our budgets, because I put some money toward it, and for my birthday, at the end of 2014, I had a HD 7990. Yes, the HD 7990 at the beginning of 2015 was a couple years outdated, but it was affordable because of that. I didn't know anything about PCIe generations or crossfire requirements or the fact that the FX6300 and a HD 7990 was a terrible matchup, but that's the card I had, and that's the card that saw me through until the end of 2015 when I upgraded to something quite a bit more modern, specifically an R9 290. Now, all of that aside, this video is me ranting about the GT620. And why do I need a GT620? Because I want to experience what my first gaming PC was like 11 years ago. And I can't do that if the only models of GT620 I can find are anywhere from 5 to 15% slower, in artificial benchmarks anyway, than the one I need. The GT620 that I want, the Asus DC2 model, it ran beautifully. You could overclock that core above 800 megahertz, and it handled it. You could overclock the RAM to just about 1000 megahertz, and it handled it. This one tops out at 700 on the core and 700 on the memory. The hell am I supposed to do with that? That doesn't even compete with the graphics card I had at the time. Yeah, it's close, but it's not close enough. And if Nvidia had just made it easier to tell at a glance which graphics card I am considering to buy, then I would be able to clear all the massive lists of GPUs for sale and find the ones that I actually want to buy, because there are so many GT620s on the market. But the majority of those came out of OEM systems. They are the OEM variants of the cards, so they're half the chip. And the rest of them run the core clock ridiculously slowly. There are GT620s out there that run at 500 megahertz or slower. I saw one that runs at 333 megahertz on the RAM. That is a memory clock speed of 667. DDR3 667. I didn't know that DDR3 chips could go that slow. I thought they bottomed out at 800. So that is ridiculous that those cards exist. But they all run DDR3. It's standard PC DDR3. And if only I had the soldering skills to just add better chips to the card and then modify the BIOS to let it use those chips. Because if I could just find some DDR3 chips that would happily run at 2000 megahertz, then I could swap them on, modify the BIOS to let it run those chips at those speeds, and see what it would let me get out of it. Unfortunately, the GT620 was not a particularly powerful card, so it wasn't that popular with budget overclockers, so there aren't that many pre-modified BIOSes out there. Secondarily, unfortunately, I am not exactly the best person for any type of programming, especially programming a VBIOS for a graphics card, so that's not exactly the best course of action there. I mean, 11 years ago when I had a GT620, I was actually taking coding at school. I was learning Python and C++, but that doesn't matter, because the third issue is I don't have the soldering skills to give this thing better chips. Even though I could probably salvage better chips, because I have 2400 megahertz DDR3 lying around. I don't have a hot air station. I do not have a quality microscope. I do have a cheap one. Thank you very much to the viewer that sent that in. Saved me some pennies from buying one. And I do not have the requisite skills for me to install better memory chips. So here I am, with parts on the way and an existing system already set up with all the drivers I need, stuck with a graphics card that in theory could be up to 15% slower than the one I want, even when you overclock it. What was the point of making this video? This is me ranting, because I have reached the end of my rope with this search, because every now and then I go on a tangent, and I like to call it Wikipedia rabbit holes. When I can't sleep because I have insomnia most nights, I just go through Wikipedia, random article generator, I read it, I go down to related articles, I read the next one, through and through and through. And sometimes I'm trying to look for a specific link between articles and it takes me a few hours. That's annoying. This has taken me weeks, and despite the fact that a viewer of the channel reached out and pointed me towards his own eBay listing for me to buy it, that ended up being an OEM variant. And I didn't realise before I paid him, so I've actually had to ask to cancel the purchase now. But it had the right clock speed, and that's all I cared about. I didn't notice the fact that it had half the CUDA cores. So I just can't find the graphics card I want. I really wish time machines exist right now. I really wish time machines existed right now, because I could just go back 11 years, take this out of my system, and use it. Because at the time when this was released, I was 15. And at the time that, at the time that I was using this, I was 15. When I was 15, I started boarding school. So for 4 days a week, my computer was completely unattended, unused. So if I had the ability to time travel, I just need to pick the right dates and take the graphics card out of my computer and then put it back before that 4 days would have been up. No one would know. But no, time machines don't exist, and wishful thinking only gets you so far. So I am now stuck with a choice. Do I attempt to find the GT620 and keep going and leave this video on pause for weeks on end? Do I go with a GT630 that I might be able to underclock to the right performance, or do I just give up and use the card I have? And I really don't know which choice to make. I really want to make this video. I really want to be able to experiment with a computer that I was using right when I started my real life with PC gaming. And coincidentally, 2014 is also the year that I got into anime. But even though I had been watching anime since I was about 4 years old, 2014 was the year that I got into it seriously, thanks to the release of Fate's Day Night Unlimited Blade Works. Because, sorry, but ufotable animation? That's exactly what 14-year-old me needed to grip me with anime. And, yeah, I've got a massive anime collection now. Adult money problems, eh? But there are websites online that will advertise outrageous prices for hard-to-find graphics cards. And all those websites is an advert to get your attention. You contact them for a quote, and then you wait a few weeks for them to be able to find the graphics card and buy it so they can then sell it to you for a markup. Since I can't find the graphics cards, and they're not going to be able to either, I did contact a few of them, see if they could give me a quote. One guy said he might be able to find me a card for 250 British pounds. Even if he could find me one, I'm not paying that. 250 British pounds is the used price of a GTX 460 right now, I think. I think you might be able to get a 460 Ti for 250 British pounds. 250 British pounds is a lot of money for a graphics card, especially one from 13 years ago. So, no. I also don't have 250 British pounds, because there are birthdays and computers that need dealing with first. So, I'm going to leave this video here before I end up ranting about something else that isn't even related to the GT620. So if you have any ideas, or if you happen to have a GT620 with a memory clock above 700 MHz, please get in touch. And before you do, could you please run GPU-Z and make sure it's the 96 CUDA core version? Because I don't want people getting in touch with giving me false hope. But this is a serious, please help me kind of thing. If you have a GT620, or you know of someone who does, that may have one with a memory clock above 700 MHz and 96 CUDA cores, the full fat die, if you are willing to let me borrow it, or if you're willing to sell it, please let me know. GT620s are not particularly expensive, provided that they are the version I want. Because there are plenty of people selling the OEM versions and the lower, cost-cut versions. Because this is what happens, by the way. Nvidia releases a reference design and then sells it to third-party board manufacturers. And then they come up with an even cheaper design with lower spec parts, because they're cheaper to get a hold of in bulk, and then they release those instead. Because the Nvidia reference design is 700 MHz on the core and 900 MHz on the memory. I think I said 850 earlier, that is wrong. There is only one manufacturer that actually did that, and that was Asus. The rest of them are 700 to 800 MHz. With some of them being as low as 333. So what the hell happened to the GT620? Also, what happened to the 600 series in general? Seriously, because you got the GT610, the GT610 OEM, you got the GT620, the GT620 OEM, the GT620 OEM 2 gig, we got the GT625, which came with various different models that I don't know off the top of my head, the GT630, which went up to 4 gigs, or 1 gig of GDDR5, which is probably the fastest version of that card. We have the GT635, we have the GT640, we have the GTX650, the 660, the 660 Ti, the 670, the 670 Ti. Actually, no, I don't think the 670 Ti exists. The 680. Did the 680 Ti exist? But the 690 existed. The 600 series is... The Fermi architecture Fermi, which is the architecture of the 500 series and the 600 series and some of the 700 series. Most of the 700 series, I think, was Kepler. Why? Why were there so many versions? Because a lot of them have their own dedicated chip. If you go and look up all the different chips for the 600 series, a lot of the different denominations of chips are specific to like one or two variants of a card. Why did that happen? Ordinarily, when you are, manufacturing these chips in a giant manufacturing facility for silicon, you end up with the full fat die, like your GT620 die, and then you cut it down. Like you find the ones that don't quite work right, you turn that into a 670 or a 660. You don't then spin off a completely different fabricator and make a chip that is a quarter the size, and then an eighth the size, and then 1/16. There is a chip for the 600 series, I think it's the GF119S, which was specific to mobile GPUs, that it's tiny. Why did you make that? Just cut down the GF119. It already existed. Why did you make a new one? What the hell was going on at Nvidia 13 years ago, man? Actually, no, it's probably more like 15 years ago, because GPU manufacturing, what actually gets released is always 2 years out of date. Because that's just the way it works. So the 5000 series, yeah, that just came out, but Nvidia is already like a year or two into designing the 6000 series. So it's not going to stay new very long. It's the way these things work. It takes so long to develop them, and then it takes even longer to get them stable, that you end up splitting the team. There's one team developing new GPUs, you got another team making those GPUs work, you got another team making those GPUs clock as fast as possible, as stable as possible, ready to sell. And when that team is doing their job, the other two teams, they're busy designing the next GPU. So before the third team that's getting ready to sell is actually ready to sell, a new GPU is already in the works. So I don't know what's going to happen over the next few years, what the 6000 series is going to be like, but I am trying to find a very specific card from the 600 series, which is technically 7 generations out of date. Technically. Because the 600 and the 700 series shared GPUs, there was no 800 series, and the 900 series was a joke. The 1000 series was great, but I need this GT620, man. I really do. And I also need to go to CEX, because it is finally 9 AM, which means they're open! Hooray! Making this video had two purposes. One, I get to vent. Two, I get to kill 30 minutes before I get to go to CEX. Yeah, since discovering CEX in 2014, it's become one of my favourite shops. My mother still swears that my favourite shop is B&Q. I go to CEX a lot more than B&Q now. While I do love B&Q, especially their in-house woodcutting facilities, which saves me hours of work doing it by hand, I spend a lot more money at CEX. A lot more money at CEX. The thousands upon thousands of pounds I've spent at B&Q since turning 18 doesn't even compare to the tens of thousands I have spent at CEX. They have so much of my money. Do you know what I buy from CEX other than anime? Computer components. Do you know what happens to those computer components? I end up doing something stupid to them, they end up dying, or I end up giving them away. Because as much as I don't want to be known for being generous, I am a fairly generous person. When it comes to my sister, especially so. I have a sweet spot for my sister. If she needs something, I give it to her. No questions asked. You want hardwood flooring in your room that costs £700 as a birthday present? Sure. You want a £500 IKEA wardrobe? Sure. You want a pink PC case from AliExpress that's going to take 2 months to get here before your birthday? Great, I'm going to come up with the money out of the blue and get it there in time. If you're wondering how I was able to afford any of that, I was 18, had absolutely no credit history, which means that every credit card company was ready to jump on me and I was still living with my mother, so I had a much larger disposable income. Yeah, it's funny the difference between earning 14,000 a year and 24,000 a year, because I am much poorer earning 24,000 a year than I was earning 14,000 a year. Because 14,000 a year, that was almost all disposable income. I had very few bills. But now I earn 24,000 a year. I have to keep the lights on and keep myself under this roof in this flat, and that's very expensive. As well as collecting anime. I will say, because I am on a tangent now. Sorry about that. The video actually ended like 10 minutes ago. I'm sorry that you're still here. The most expensive thing in my life is not the anime collection. It's my Plex server. Because the hard drives in that thing fill up way too quickly for my own good. I bought an 8TB hard drive for extra capacity 3 months ago. It has 1TB left. I need to buy another 8TB hard drive next month. Actually, I think I need to start going up to 12TB. I only have 1 drive bay left. Great. Now I have to start affording 12TB drives. Yeah. If I could go back to being 18 again, like if I had a clear credit history, I just had that £2,400 limit on my credit card all over again, I'd just buy hard drives at this point, because they are so expensive. And the amount of hard drives I order that end up here, that end up arriving broken. I have ordered so... Last year was abysmal for hard drives. I bought 4 hard drives in the span of 5 months. All of them were broken. I had to return them and wait for replacements. That is 1 hard drive a month, almost, dead. And the only reason I needed to buy those hard drives is because the oldest hard drives in that system had started to fail. So it's great when you've got a partially failed drive waiting to be backed up to a new drive, waiting for its contents to be copied over, or for a parity rebuild, and then you find out that the new drive doesn't even work. It's a good thing I have parity drives. The amount of data I could have lost back then. It was only a year ago, but like the amount of data I could have lost last year, because I had 3 hard drives fail, and one of them was a parity drive, so I really could have lost data. I just want to point out as well, parity is not a backup. RAID is not a backup. A backup is a backup. An actual backup of digital data is a complete copy on a separate drive or separate system. That is a backup. Ideally, you would have a 3-2-1 tiered backup system. 3 copies on at least 2 devices with one of them off-site. That is the ideal storage solution for any digital data. Now, I have a 2-2-1 system. I have 2 copies in 2 different formats, but one of them is... no, it's 2-2-0, because they're both in the same room. Because the server is mostly full of anime, so that's one format, being digital on DVD and Blu-ray, and then the second format, and the second copy, is the server, and they're on two different formats, 2 different systems. I know it doesn't quite count, because the other half of the server isn't anime, but it counts in my book. It's just, if there's a fire, I will lose both copies. At least the anime is insured. And don't get me started on insuring the anime. It's a tedious process. I learnt the hard way when I got contents insurance that when you have a sizable movie collection, or collection of anything in general, I was told that people who collect game cards, Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever, it's much the same there, where every single item in the collection has to be listed separately with proof of purchase before it can be insured. As well, they had to send someone over to do an inspection of how my anime is stored. And because it is stored in a concrete building on a wooden shelf, my insurance rate went up £2 a month. So I spend £15 a month just insuring my anime. 15 quid a month to insure my anime. And that's probably going to go up soon as well, because that price is based on the value. And every time that I add more anime, I have to resubmit the collection to my insurance agency. And every now and then they say, yep, that has to go up 10p a month. That has to go up 5p a month. It adjusts as the value adjusts. If I had the money for it, if I had the money for it, I could, you know, have a complete cabinet for this thing. If it was made of fire retardant materials, it would make it so much cheaper. But the cost of doing that is astronomical for the size of the anime collection. And because it's all disc media, DVD and Blu-ray, insurance doesn't cover climate damage, you know, disc rot. So, yeah, I should really have a climate-controlled room for them as well. I don't. Given that you can see my kitchen right there. Moisture is a concern. Heat is a concern. UV is a concern. Bleaching some of the artwork, maybe. So... Anyway, that was a 40-minute rant for a 25-minute rant. Yeah, the last 16 minutes of this had nothing to do with the graphics card, if you hadn't noticed. But I need to go now, because this video is going to take forever to upload. And as I said like 10 minutes ago, or whatever it was, I need to go to CEX. I have a few CPUs to pick up. Yeah, conveniently, my local CEX actually had a couple of the CPUs I needed in stock. So I saved like £5 on postage. But it's going to take me like an hour and 5 minutes to get there. And £5 in bus fees. I don't live anywhere near the CEX. Yeah, there are two CEXs near me. They are basically equidistant from each other, but the Hastings one is bigger.